So now we're going to go back quickly to Patrick and Ana, I think, and then...
The despondency that you'd normally get looking at this really adverse balance of forces that Leo hints at, that we just are looking at such a difficult world terrain, I think it can be slightly mitigated by the one story that I hope's a template for potential future society and state relationships against world capital. What am I speaking of? It's the process that began really in the 1980s in New York, and probably was something in Toronto that your gay, lesbian, gay male especially community were supporting. Access to medicines for that are called antiretrovirals, ARVs. And when that movement found its voice in South Africa in the Treatment Action Campaign, 1999, it looked very difficult because the medicines which could prevent the full breakdown of an immune system cost over $10,000 a year 15 years ago. They were really expensive, and only a few hundred people, mostly white South African men, were able to get these medicines. But it turned out that in Brazil at the same time, and in India, a little bit in Thailand, generics were being produced. And what I thought when the sort of BRICS from below argument came up, that there was something that the Treatment Action Campaign in South Africa generalized, and it became such an exceptional force that still, well, today, now it's more or less 10 years after the victory, it's always pointed to as the model for how we move progressive politics forward, especially progressive anti-capitalist politics. For this reason, the reason that it was a $10,000 a year big pharma corp patented cost for getting these medicines was intellectual property. And that was enforced in the TRIPS, the Trade-Related Intellectual Property System in the World Trade Organization. But meantime, you had in South Africa 5.5, 6 million people HIV positive who were going to die. And there was no way, with maybe about 1,000 really committed activists whose immune systems were compromised, who were stigmatized, where there was no hope for life, for even doing education, because you didn't have those medicines. They were too expensive. You can just imagine the frustration. Leaders like one of my PhD students, really brilliant, Vuyiseka Devula or Zaki Ahmed, very well known, just said, we won't go on medicines until we get them for everyone. And in the way were big pharma corps who wanted to keep the patents, the US government, of course, until a little bit of a shift and change when Bush under pressure, even Al Gore under pressure from ACTA, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, began to shift policy. And I'll come to the point, because when you see those international links connect to a big South African movement that were at one point able to get 600 arrests per day, demanding access to the medicines, and demanding that the South African government follow the lead of the Brazilian and Indian governments in opening up a generics industry to make the ARVs locally. You really feel that there's something there in the globalization of people against the globalization of capital. So it was, by 2004, even with an AIDS denialist president, Thabo Mbeki, who refused treatment, had all manner of bizarre theories about AIDS and HIV and toxicity. But even against all those odds, right, fighting your own president, fighting the World Trade Organization TRIPS, fighting big pharma corps, the US government, and fighting the difficulty of mobilizing people in this disease that had caused such distress. Nevertheless, those activists persisted, and they won, by 2004, the commitment to get a rollout of AIDS medicines in clinics made generically. And finally, by 2006, they were starting to make them in South Africa. We found the globalization of capital replaced by a localization of these generic medicines that were sort of, in a sense, decommodified, given free. So suddenly we've got 3 million people getting the AIDS medicines. And the spirit of that victory, against all odds, is obvious, but the numbers, the numbers of people whose lives have been saved by that victory will blow your mind. I always just think, holy shit, since 1994, by far this is the most extraordinary success, because life expectancy, which had been 63 back in 1993, as AIDS began to become widespread, and eventually about 20% of South Africans were HIV positive, in the antenatal clinics, women. And then the life expectancy went down to 52. And with the access to the AIDS medicines, won through this extraordinary struggle against global capital, the life expectancy today is back up to 62. So a 10-year increase, really unprecedented in public health history. And I think that's that spirit that will allow us one day to think about other sectors and other terrains of struggle where we'll find opportunities that link these activists in extraordinary social movements in the South. The MST has a similar Via Campesina, the Treatment Action Campaign generalized, and maybe finding allies in states, even states like Brazil with its complicated past. To me, that represents the globalization of people against the globalization of capital. And it's going to come, I think, as many in the sort of world systems theorization would posit, from the weak link in the global capitalist chain. The most unequal countries, where the social tensions are most intense, and where activists have fought off dictatorship in Brazil, apartheid in South Africa, and now have even more expansive campaigns and struggles ahead. That to me would be BRICS from below, an exemplar. Ana.
Okay, so quickly, because I want to hear more actually from you. I'm very glad to be here. I didn't say that in the beginning, but I have to thank Leo and York University and Judy for organizing and inviting me to be here. And this panel is for me like a privilege to be together with you. Just quickly to Leo's point and what Patrick and Judy were bringing, BRICS from below cannot be an abstract concept. Especially because business, because multinational corporations, because capital is working together. So while the BRICS states are meeting in such summits, there's this BRICS business forum. While the G20 is meeting in these meetings that you saw here, there's the B20. Have you heard of B20? It's the business 20 biggest companies in the world. So business is very organized. So capital is very organized. And they gave interviews, and they are doing business together and advancing. And the BRICS Business Forum really support a lot the state's initiative for the development bank and for the contingent arrangement. So they are supporting it. So something must be wrong if we also support those two new institutions, right? As Leo said, one feature of imperialism is capital exportation, and this can be done in two ways. One is the direct investment, in the case of Vale, or the case of Chinese oil companies, or Tata, multinational group from India, or Brazilian construction companies, which are also in the US very strong. If Donald Trump is in Rio, constructing towers in the port area of Rio, total speculation investment. Odebrecht is constructing the airport of Miami and dams in Louisiana, and also Vale's infrastructure in Mozambique. And the other way of exporting capital is financial, is credit and finance support. And that's the bank of the BRICS, that's the Asian Investment Banks for Infrastructure, that's the Brazilian National Development Bank, BNDES. And what we see that comes out of this new architecture of capital from the global south, if you want to call it, is a new sort of south-south indebtedness. What few people are working and researching about. I started to do this a little bit, and this is also a space for resistance and struggle. The Chinese credit to African countries such as Mozambique and Angola is being done through the export of other resources such as oil and minerals. And Brazil is also trying to build the same architecture for African countries too. So what kind of South-South indebtedness are we creating with that? What kind of productive structure are in these African countries to pay Chinese and Brazilian banks and others with their own resources? So BRICS from below has to be built, has to come out of very concrete struggles. I think that's the point that we have to really come out of here with this conclusion. Be this in the case of very concrete multinationals such as Vale, and Judith didn't show, but I want to show you this. It's one of the, let's say, products that we have. This is the shadow report of Vale's annual report. It's just the same design, just the same idea, the same image as they have this image department, but with our own words and with our own reality of the people and workers that are struggling against Vale. Has to be within those struggles, be this multinational corporations or be these projects that are being financed by the BRICS Bank. And I have to say that I think that infrastructure is maybe the new global consensus, be this the G20 or the BRICS Bank or BNDES or the World Bank, that's still financing a lot of big infrastructure projects, and that's causing a lot of effects, a lot of negative impacts in Africa, in Brazil, and other countries. So this must be the basis for building South-South solidarity, North-South solidarity, in any kinds of struggle. So I think this is the point. Two experiences come out of my mind. One is Vale that Judith just talked about. There is this experience of HIV medicine, but there's also the experience, and that's not a joke, mega events and sports events, which is a common experience among BRICS countries. So Rio is now, Brazil has just hosted the World Soccer World Cup. Rio is now this year, unfortunately, hosting the Olympics, and it's a big thing in the middle of this huge crisis. Beijing has also hosted Olympic Games. South Africa has hosted a World Cup, and now the next World Cup is in Russia. So why are these mega sports events taking place in the BRICS countries? What they want with that? What the attraction of this image and this investments to these countries? What is that about? And what are the contradictions and impacts that these communities, workers, and all the public budget that is suffering with those mega events and sporting events? So these are, I think, the basis for us to talk about BRICS from below.